I kicked the bedroom door open so hard it nearly came off the hinges. And there she was, my wife, naked, tangled in the sheets with her boss. She screamed. He scrambled. I didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't throw a single punch. Instead, I raised my phone and hit play. The speakers roared to life, filling the room with their own voices, their late-night calls, their dirty messages, their plans to ruin me and start fresh with everything I'd worked for. Her face drained of color. His jaw dropped. And I just stood there, calm as a storm before it breaks, and said, "Every lie. Every word. Your whole world ends tonight." Before we continue, please subscribe to this channel and drop a comment where you are watching from. I didn't just wake up one morning and decide to break down the bedroom door. No, this betrayal had been cooking, simmering under my nose for months. It started with the late nights. She'd tell me she was finishing reports or meeting a client, but I knew her office hours better than she did. I'd drop her off and pick her up sometimes, being the supportive husband. Yet when I called her coworkers, they swore she had left hours earlier. Then came the phone. She guarded it like it was the nuclear codes. She'd laugh at texts, and when I asked, it was always the same answer, "It's just Mom." But here's the thing, her mom and I talked often, and she never texted my wife like that. The final straw. One night, she left at 11:30 p.m. to buy milk. Who the hell needs milk at midnight? She didn't stumble back in until 2 a.m., smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, hair messy like she'd been in a wind tunnel. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream or demand answers. Instead, I made a decision that night: if she was playing games, I'd play smarter. I hired a private investigator. It didn't take long. Within a week, I had everything. Pictures. Messages. Locations. Even receipts for hotel rooms charged to her boss's corporate account. She wasn't just cheating, she was careless. And that's when I realized something darker was at play. Because in one of those messages, I saw words that chilled me. "Once the divorce goes through, everything he built will be ours. Not mine. Not yours. Ours." That's when the picture snapped into focus. This wasn't just an affair. They were planning to gut me financially, strip me down, and toss me aside like trash. And right there, I swore to myself, they wanted war. They just picked the wrong man. The night I read that message about, "Once the divorce goes through," I didn't sleep. Not a second. I just lay there next to her, watching her pretend to be asleep, wondering how many times she had kissed me goodnight while planning my destruction. But rage doesn't win wars. Strategy does. So I started moving. Quietly. Carefully. The first thing I did was open a private account at a bank she didn't know about. I began funneling small amounts of money into it. Just enough that she wouldn't notice. By the time I was done, nearly every liquid asset we had was sitting safely out of reach. Then, I spoke to a lawyer. A good one. Not just for divorce, but for asset protection. We built a plan that would make it nearly impossible for her to walk away with the empire I had built. The house. Transferred. The business I owned. Reorganized under a trust. Even the car she loved driving. Legally tied up in a way that she couldn't touch. Meanwhile, I played the role of the oblivious husband. I kissed her good morning, cooked dinner, even laughed at her fake excuses. She thought she was running the perfect con. But behind the scenes, I was documenting everything. Every receipt. Every late-night absence. Every message the PI uncovered. And when I had enough evidence to sink her and her boss in one blow, I waited. Because revenge isn't just about striking. It's about timing. And I wanted to make sure the knife twisted at the deepest point. That opportunity came with her birthday. She told me to take a business trip since she'd be working late anyway. I knew what that meant. She was planning to celebrate with him. But what she didn't know was that her birthday would become the stage for the greatest performance of her life, and the night I shattered her little empire. Her birthday landed on a Thursday that year. A Thursday, ordinary to everyone else, but for me, it became the day I circled in red ink on my calendar. 2 weeks before, she started dropping hints. "Robert, maybe you should take that trip to Dallas you were talking about. I'll be swamped with work anyway." Work. That was her favorite word. A 4-letter excuse she wielded like a sword. I played along. I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "You're probably right. I'll let you focus on your projects." Inside, I was laughing. Because I already knew who her project was, and he wasn't holding a laptop. Now, I could have confronted her right then and there, slammed the evidence on the table, screamed until the neighbors called the cops. But where's the satisfaction in that? No. I wanted her mask to rip off in front of the people whose opinions actually mattered to her. So I made calls. A lot of them. Her parents first. Her sister next. A couple of her closest friends. Even one of her aunts she only saw twice a year but bragged about constantly. I told them all the same thing. Big surprise for her birthday. Don't tell her. Just be at the apartment by 8:30 a.m. The excitement in their voices nearly gave me away. Her mom even volunteered to bring a cake. And here's the beauty of it, not a single one of them suspected what the surprise really was. They thought I was staging a sweet gesture, a thoughtful husband pulling out all the stops. If only they knew. The night before, she kissed me goodnight, humming to herself, already dressed in the lingerie I hadn't seen her wear for me in months. My stomach churned, but my face didn't flinch. I just told her I'd be leaving early for Dallas. She smiled, thinking she had won. But that smile wouldn't last. Because by the time she was bent over for her boss the next morning, her family would be walking through the door behind me. And the fallout would be biblical. The morning came. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't even bother pretending. I simply parked at my friend Jason's place 2 blocks away, waiting. By 8 a.m., my phone buzzed with confirmation, everyone had arrived. Her mom was holding the cake. Her dad was carrying balloons. Her sister had a camera ready to record. Perfect. I led the procession myself. Down the hall, whispering, "Shoot," like we were sneaking in for a birthday prank. The tension in my chest wasn't nerves, it was adrenaline. The kind you get right before pulling a trigger. We lined up at the door. Her father chuckled, shaking his head. "She's going to freak when she sees us." Oh, she was going to freak, all right. I slid the key into the lock. Turned it slowly. The door swung open. And we crept inside. The hallway was dim, quiet except for the faint sound of movement. A rhythm. A moan. Her mother's face lit up, thinking it was music from a speaker. I held up my hand for silence. Then, with one swift motion, I kicked the bedroom door wide open and shouted at the top of my lungs. Surprise! And what we saw inside froze everyone in place. Her. Naked. Bent over the bed. Her boss behind her, mid-thrust. The cake hit the floor. Her sister screamed. Her father roared a curse that rattled the walls. Her mom dropped to her knees like someone had shot her. And me? I just stood there, arms folded, watching the show I had scripted from the start. The room exploded before the echoes of my surprise had even died down. Her father lunged forward first, fists clenched, shouting words I didn't even know a man his age could string together. "You filthy, backstabbing," his voice cracked as rage tore through him. Her mother dropped the cake, the frosting splattering across the carpet like blood at a crime scene. She clutched her chest, gasping, as if her own daughter's betrayal had ripped a hole straight through her heart. Her sister. She didn't scream this time. She started recording. The phone was already up, camera light blinking, capturing every second of her sister's shame. And my wife froze. She stayed bent forward for half a second longer, body locked in some twisted tableau of shock, before scrambling to cover herself with the sheet. Her face was pale, eyes darting between me, her family, and the man behind her. That man, the boss, the almighty executive she had thrown me aside for, was a mess. He stumbled off the bed, clutching his pants to his chest like some desperate teenager caught in the act. His voice cracked as he tried to reason with people who had no intention of hearing him. It's not what it looks like. Her father snapped back, his voice thunder. Not what it looks like. You're naked in my daughter's bed while her husband stands here, and you think you can say it's not what it looks like. The boss's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He had no answer. And then came her voice. Broken. Wailing. "Robert, please, how could you do this to me?" That was it. That was the moment that set me off, not the cheating, not the lies, not even the smug grin she had worn for weeks leading up to this. It was the gall. The nerve. To stand there, caught in the middle of an act that shattered everything we had built, and accuse me. I laughed. A sharp, cold laugh that cut through the chaos. Everyone turned to look at me. "How could I do this to you?" I repeated, my voice steady, almost too calm for the storm around us. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folder, the one with the PI's photos, the printouts of messages, the receipts. I tossed it onto the bed, right next to her bare legs. The papers fanned out like confetti at a funeral. "Don't worry," I said, locking eyes with her. "I didn't just bring your family to the show. I brought the evidence, too." Her sister gasped when she glanced at the papers. Her mom shook her head in disbelief, mumbling prayers under her breath. Her dad looked like he wanted to rip the boss's throat out with his bare hands. And her. She started sobbing, the same line over and over. "It's not what it looks like, it's not what it looks like." I leaned in close enough that she could feel the heat of my words. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like. And this is just the beginning." Then I turned and walked out, leaving her there in tears, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully built lie. For me, it wasn't just a birthday surprise. It was the first act of her downfall. The morning after the birthday surprise, my phone lit up with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Lawyers. Her boss's PR team. Even her mother, begging me not to ruin the family name by making this public. I ignored them all. Because I had already set the wheels in motion. Months earlier, when suspicion turned into certainty, I didn't just hire a PI for photos. I consulted with a divorce attorney, one of the best in the city. The kind of guy who charged more per hour than some people made in a week. And I had prepared, line by line, document by document, to ensure that when the time came, she wouldn't just lose me. She'd lose everything. So, while she cried in her parents' house, I filed. The divorce papers went through that same week. Along with claims of marital misconduct, alienation, and breach of fiduciary trust. See, her affair wasn't just personal, it was financial. She had siphoned funds from our joint account, paying for luxury dinners, hotels, and even business trips with her boss. Every penny was accounted for. Every receipt catalogued. When her lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, mine slid a binder across the table. Hotel invoices. Uber receipts. Text messages where she bragged to her boss about finally being rid of Robert. Her face, when she saw the evidence laid out in black and white, drained of all color. She glanced at me, searching for mercy in my eyes. She found none. The judge didn't take long. Within a month, I had secured the house, the car, the savings account she thought she had hidden from me. She, on the other hand, was left with debts. Her promotion at work gone. The company launched an internal investigation into her relationship with her boss. He was demoted quietly, shuffled into a corner office with no power. She was fired outright. The day she walked out of that building with her belongings in a cardboard box, I was parked across the street. Watching. Waiting. And when our eyes met through the windshield of my car, I smiled. A small, cold smile. Because this wasn't just about ending our marriage. It was about making sure she felt, with every step she took, the weight of what she had thrown away. When the house keys turned back in the door after she was escorted out with a box of things, it felt less like victory and more like a hollow echo. People imagine revenge ends the moment the other person falls. They don't tell you about the quiet that follows, the small, private reckonings, the slow, ugly unspooling in empty rooms. Word spread. In our circles, corners of mutual friends and colleagues whispered and withdrew. The office rumor mill vomited out half-truths and invented worse ones. She had lost her job, her status, her safety net. But what hurt her most, what withered her like a plant starved of water, was the withdrawal of people she'd relied on for applause. Her mother called me once, voice shaking, asking me not to destroy what's left. I listened to her beg and hung up without an answer. That call wasn't for me, it was for a woman who'd finally seen the cost of her choices. Mercy offered now felt cheap. If I had anything left of my old self, it was the understanding that sometimes letting someone see the full wreckage of their decisions is the only kind of mercy that will ever teach them anything. A few days later our home phone rang, a number I recognized as my sister-in-law's. She used to be on my side, once. I picked up, and the silence on the other end said more than any words. Finally she spoke, voice thin, "She's at Mom's. She won't eat. She says she can't face anyone." Of course she can't face anyone, the people who mattered to her most had been witness to her betrayal. Then the begging started. Not dramatic, not the cinematic confession people imagine, but small, repetitive appeals that batter at a person's patience. "Robert, please. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll pay you back. The offers were meaningless because they came too late. They were the desperate flailing of someone trying to stitch clothing back together with duct tape. When she showed up at our front door 3 weeks after she was forced out, the scenery had changed. The expensive coat she once wore with ease was gone, she wore a thrifted jacket that hung on her like an ill-fitting costume. Her hair was a mess. She looked 17 again and 80 all at once, young enough to still feel, old enough to know the damage. "Robert," she said, voice broken like she'd been chewing glass. "I can't sleep. I can't eat. I've lost everything. Please." I opened the door and let her stand there in the hallway like a ghost. There was a part of me, months ago, that would have taken her in and mended the torn places with soft words and promises. That part was a reckless fool. Now I was practical. I filed for divorce, I reminded her. "You made your choices." I didn't say it harshly. I didn't have to. The facts hung in the air heavier than any curse. She sobbed, half speech, asking for pity, asking for a redo, for an undo. I listened until her tears dried into a resentful cough. Her sister called me next, the same sister who'd led rumor-laced whispers to the boss's ear months before. The line between them had always been thin, now it ripped entirely. "You did what you had to do," she said in a voice that felt guilty even as it declared approval. "We all had to see it. Maybe now she will change." Change. A kindness word tossed like a buoy to someone drowning. Her parents split in their responses. Her father stopped answering my messages entirely, grief and anger contorted him into silence. Her mother crossed a weird line between protectiveness and shame. She'd come to me twice, eyes red-rimmed, asking for closure and forgiveness. "She's my daughter," she'd say. "I forgive her, but I don't know how to trust her again." Her words were thin salves, unable to stitch what was torn. Out in the world, she learned a new vocabulary of survival. Grocery store checkouts where acquaintances pretended not to see her. Invitations that used to be automatic, now conspicuously absent. The friends who once delighted in her posts suddenly found they were too busy. She began showing up at events alone, and even the air felt colder. People gauge someone's worth quickly when given a reason to change their posture. Betrayal makes a person radioactive in social circles. It isn't always moral judgment so much as self-preservation. One particularly stinging instance, a mutual friend, someone who had toasted our anniversaries, sent me a private message after hearing the whole story. "I didn't realize the depths," he wrote. "I always thought she was ambitious." Wow. Under that moderate phrase lay the judgment. That message felt like a verdict from a jury I didn't ask to convene. The boss's fall was quieter but equally brutal. He was shunted off into an empty office with no team, whispers about HR complaints following his name. Power returns quickly only if you have allies. He had none left. A man who'd once strolled into client meetings with swagger now took the elevator alone, avoiding eye contact. When he tried reaching out to apologize through intermediaries, no one returned his call. Her attempts to claw back were clumsy, public, and utterly ineffectual. She showed up at mutual friends' dinner parties, smiling too wide, making jokes that landed like stones. People excused themselves early. She tried pleading on social media, the kind of performative regret that rings hollow when the receipts exist to prove otherwise. The internet chews and spits out these stories with a cruelty that makes private pain public spectacle. One night, months after everything fell apart, I received an email from her. No lawyer. No mediator. Just a plain subject line, "I'm sorry." It was long, disjointed, a stream of guilt and confession dotted with housewives' pleas and sporadic tears rendered in typographical form. She admitted to lying, to betraying love for a dangerous cocktail of ego and greed. She told me she thought being with him meant she would finally feel important, seen, invincible. The words were small and hard, they didn't undo anything. I deleted it without responding. It wasn't cruelty. It was finality. Her apology wasn't an instrument of repair, it was acknowledgement. Closure comes in many forms. Sometimes it is not in forgiveness but in the simple act of letting a thing be what it is and moving on. In the street outside our old neighborhood, I saw her once more. She was with a woman I did not know, clutching a paper cup of coffee like it was an anchor. Our eyes met for a second. There were no words. She exhaled slowly, and the expression on her face was the one that haunts me the least and teaches me the most, regret. Not the melodramatic kind that makes the headlines, but a quieter version, a small, gnawing animal that lives under the ribs. She regretted the easy applause that discarded the weight of consequence. She regretted nights she had thought to be luxurious and found empty. She regretted mornings that once started with coffee made for two and now began alone. Her life had been pared down to necessities and the geometry of loss. And yes, the loss of luxury and status hurts. But the deeper thing that was stripped away, trust, the ability to be taken at your word, is harder to measure and even harder to recover. What I felt watching her stumble through the remnants of a life she'd mismanaged was not triumph alone. There was a small, colder reward, a sense of justice finally in place. But I also felt angry in a different way, anger at what she had taken from me that no legal filing could ever return. Time. Years. The simple, unglamorous tenderness of shared mornings. Those losses sit in the soft spots of the skull and ache in private. Still, the scoreboard read in black and white. She had lost her job, her circle, and the life she'd used as camouflage. The boss had lost professional standing. Friends had retracted. The house, the money, all mine. The legal world restored property and papers and accounts. The moral world required a different currency. And while some might argue my revenge was harsh, consider this: she planned to demolish the foundation of my life while lounging in beds that weren't mine. I didn't invent a punishment that equaled some cinematic catharsis. I simply used the instruments available to me, proof, law, and timing, to make sure she couldn't profit from her betrayal. When the dust settled, I sat with what remained: an apartment that smelled faintly of coffee, a stack of books I'd finally read, and a life pared down to essentials. I healed, slowly. I dated, cautiously. And whenever regret popped up like an unwelcome advertisement, I'd remember the quiet collapse I watched and tell myself the lesson was brutal but necessary. Revenge doesn't end the day the gavel drops or the locks change. That's the mistake people make when they watch from the outside. They think the story stops when the villain falls. But living with the aftermath is its own kind of chapter. For weeks, silence felt heavy. No late-night arguments. No footsteps across the hallway. No perfume lingering on the pillows. The house echoed differently, like it was waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. It was disorienting, but it was also liberating. I realized how much of myself had been wrapped around her moods, her needs, her games. Now, mornings belonged to me again. Black coffee, 2 eggs, and peace, not the kind that feels temporary, but the kind that breathes deeper. I started rebuilding the life she thought she could burn down. Finances were secure, because I'd moved my assets when I suspected her plans. The house was legally mine. My work picked up momentum again because I wasn't weighed down by constant suspicion. The funny thing about betrayal is that once you survive it, your perspective sharpens. Little things you used to ignore, the sunset spilling gold through the blinds, laughter with friends over a simple dinner, become treasures. I wasn't looking for grand gestures anymore. I was building stability with my own hands, and it felt stronger than anything I'd had with her. As for her, she faded. Mutual acquaintances told me she moved to a smaller city, tried to restart, but her reputation followed her like smoke clinging to clothes. The boss? Last I heard, he was quietly pushed out of the company and struggling to freelance. Their grand plan left them both with less than they started with. And me? I didn't waste another second chasing their downfall. I didn't need to. The universe had already finished the job I started. One evening, I stood in my apartment, wine glass in hand, city lights blinking through the window. It hit me then: I had survived something meant to destroy me. Not just survived, I'd walked out stronger, sharper, and free. Would I ever forgive her? No. Forgiveness implies erasing the debt, and some debts aren't meant to be cleared. What I chose instead was indifference. Indifference is stronger than hate. Hate still binds you to someone. Indifference sets you free. So when people ask if I regret the way I handled it, if I regret the cold precision with which I dismantled her scheme, my answer is simple. I regret that I married a woman who forced me to become this sharp. But I don't regret surviving her. Because in the end, she lost everything she gambled for. And I gained the one thing she never thought I'd find again, peace. And that's the truest revenge of all. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and drop a comment where you are watching from.